Okay, I wanted to do a little bit with the new input system because there just always seems to be so much confusion with it. So here's like well, I guess not an empty scene. It's got stuff in it, but nothing like the train in a capsule and an empty FSM. In fact, I'll just delete that. How about that? Here we have this. I'm going to take the camera and I'm just going to move it over real quick so it's there. I want to use a new input system because there's, like I said, there's a lot of confusion, and I think a lot of it's people. I think still look at it like the old input system when you have like say get key down, space for jump or something. Like you're always looking at, oh, we're using the key, like key down. What's the key doing? Key up, whatever. And the input system, the new input system is a fair bit different, right? So for example, let's put our input component onto something. It doesn't need to be on the player, by the way. You could easily put this on an object anywhere. This is just the way we're reading data. It's easy if it's on the player. I think it's just a common thing. All right, so this is all empty. I'm going to hit create actions, and you need tutorial 3D, sure. So we've created that. Now it created these by default. Cool, whatever. But I'm not going to use them. We're going to make a new map. We're going to call this our tutorial stuff. Now, the player, the UI, and tutorial stuff. And this has these actions in here. So I'm going to delete this action. So let's just create some actions, and let's look at how we set these things up. Now, whatever game you're making, you could make a lot of actions, right? Unlike the normal input, when you're just going off the key down, if I got this open, key down is going to do this. If I got this open, or if I'm holding this item, the key down is going to do that, right? We don't need to do that. So we could say, how about shoot? We could say shoot, and it comes up with a binding and a thing. So we can say button value pass through. I'm going to keep it at button, and the interaction, it's going to be, I can do it as hold and give it a specified amount of time, multi-tap press, so forth. So let's just go with the basic press. Now I can do press only, the release only, or press and release. So let's do press, and then the actual key, I can hit listen, and let's say I'll use, I don't know, O. Right, so that there will now just function. Now I could reuse that O and maybe have it on stop shooting, like if we wanted to. I don't think I would actually do this for a game for the stop shooting, but for demonstration purposes this is fine. Okay, now let's do another press, but this time on release only, and the binding is going to be, oh, we're going to use that same key. You don't have to, but I'm going to, just so we can see it. So we have O for shooting and stop shooting. Save, close. So now we have our default map. We want the tutorial stuff. I'm going to turn auto switching off, and that's pretty much it. So now I believe there's a lot of people, I believe, use the wrong, to me is the wrong. All right, like if I use the button event, I think is what they like to use. Right now it wants an action, so if I just hit this, it Okay, here's the player, here's the tutorial, shoot, and stop shooting. Now I'm going to use this one just to show you something. This is a common issue that I see. Like, okay, so is it pressed? Is pressed event? Okay, let's use that one. Is pressed. And we're going to come over here. We're just going to finish and come back. Right? So it's not being this input isn't on holding. It's just being on pressed. But if you watch what happens. Right? If I push O, we've hit a loop of 1,000. Okay. Crashed. It doesn't like that. Right? And I think a lot of people like to use that action, and there's workarounds to get around it. I like triggered event. Right? To me, it just seems better. Alright, so I'll use that same event. So exact same thing. I'm just going to select my action, use this event when it's being triggered. And if I watch now, if I press it, it went. Just like that. Perfect. I can press as fast as I want. It's working exactly how I would figure it would. Now I could take this and let's bring in the other one, and let's do this, the stop shooting, and then we'll say stop pressed, and let's bring that over here. Alright, so now this state wants the O to be released. So if I press it, we go in. If I release, we come out. In, out, in, out. Right? Which is why you have, you can have a lot of different actions. You can have an action like, oh, I want to open up my UI. I want an action for pausing the game. I want an action for reloading, for shooting, for switching weapons, for whatever. You can make as many actions as you want, right? So let's take a look at, just going to double click on that, just a fast way to get in there. Let's open up a new action, and we'll call it hold timer. And this can, well, this will also be a button. And the interaction, we're going to say hold. And the hold time, let's give it like 3 seconds. Let's just put this out there super crazy. Right? And, well, we don't want to do any of this type of stuff. Not for this, not for a button. And the button, let's give it a listen. Let's use P. So if we hold P for 3 seconds, it'll trigger. Alright, so let's come over here. I'm just going to duplicate this one, but I'm going to change it to that stop shooting. There it is, hold timer. And then this is held. And we'll come over here and just zoom back and shoot back. So here, if I now press O, release, press O, release, press P and hold, there it goes. See how it went? Right, and I'm still holding it, nothing's happening, right, because it fired, right? If I press and I hold again, you can count to 3 seconds, but you're already pretty late, there it goes, right? So that might be good for various things, maybe a UI menu or something. Obviously not a 3-second wait, that would be excessive, but hey, whatever. Okay, let's go back into this. Let's do another action. Let's build move. And move, we don't want a button. Let's use a value. And the control type isn't going to be a button anymore. We can do an axis, which is just a float. Maybe you're doing a 2D, right? Okay, let's do that. In fact, let's change the name of this to move 2D. So the interactions, we don't actually have to do any of that, but we do need, I am going to get rid of this. I'm going to delete this because we're getting an axis value, and I want the -1 to 1. So I want positive negative binding, just like that. So what is the negative binding? So let's go listen and let's go G. So positive, again, let's go listen and let's go H. Right? Those on the keyboards. And that could be like a joystick or anything, right? And you can make multiples. Like we could have G and H, and we could also have, 1 and 2. Whatever, you can have as many of those as you want. Right? So we now have a 1D axis with a negative for G and a positive for H called move 2D. So let's now, in here, we're not using a triggered event because we're not using an actual, like we're not using this stuff. We're not using the interactions, right? Like these ones we're using the interactions. This one's not. All we're doing is getting a float because that's all an axis is. It's just a float. It's just a a float, really. And we're going to store it. And this is our move 2D. There we go. So let's take a look. That was G and H, if I remember right. So there's G. You can see -1 and H, +1. Let go, goes to 0. Right? Cool. Working perfect. And I can go to that, and I can put in processors. Can't really normalize a 1 to 0. I can invert it. We could scale it. Something like that, maybe. And I'm not too sure, understand why you'd want to necessarily do that. I mean, I'm sure you'd have a reason. But there are modifiers that we can stick onto things, right? Because now we're -5 to 5. Right, so we've scaled it up. And vice versa, we can also normalize it, which I'll show you some of that because we're going to make another one, but we're going to do a vector. Because what if we want a move 3D? Oh, 3D. Right, we're going to use another value. So now it's going to be a vector 2. And I'm going to put this on, but not quite yet. We are going to look at something first. So we want the up, down, left, right composite, right? And it gave us that option because we selected a vector 2. Okay, so what is up? And maybe I'll just do the basic W and that. But again, like you could be doing anything with it. Really doesn't matter. And instead you can put numerous things in here if you wanted to. Alright, so here, okay, so now we have the classic WSAD on a vector 2 for move 3D. So if I now come over here and we're going to do get vector 2, we can now say, alright, tutorial move 3D, which is going to give us a vector. Now we could store the X and the Y as well, but we'll say 3D vector. There we go. Now, there's an important thing with this, and I'm going to show you this, especially if you're using this for any kind of movement, is if I push left, you can see it goes 1, right? everything works, right? And I can put them both around. Oh, and it's automatically doing our, see if I hit 2 of them, it's 0.7.7, which is good. That's what you want for movement. Because if you look at a joystick, I have one right here actually. If you go one direction, I don't know if I'm lined up with the camera or not. Do I even have the camera on? Yeah, I got the camera on. Oh yeah. I don't see it here. Whatever. I'm crazy. It's late at night. Anyways, I go one direction, I'm getting a 1 on a value, right? If I go down, I'm getting 1 on a value. Thing is I can't go on an angle and get 1 on the value here and 1 on the value here. It's kind of lerping in between those things, right? Which is why you get that 0.7.7. And of course, I'm hitting keys all crazy now. And which is good. That's what you want. And if you don't have that, you need to normalize it, right? So that you do have it. Because if you were multiplying this by a speed, and I'm moving, you know, X speed sideways, and I push forward, I'm getting a 1-1. You'll start moving too fast. You get that kind of weird thing happening you see sometimes in maybe some games. So with this one, I'm going to put, let's do a normalize, even though to me it seems like it's doing that anyways, but maybe I've got it asked backwards, who knows. So when it's normalized, it should technically maintain that 0.7.7. We shouldn't see anything different. Yeah. Which is what you want. Now, normally I would normalize it anyways just by default, just in case that wasn't happening. Who knows what you have for joysticks or what's happening with all that, but normalization is usually a good thing, I find. And of course you could scale that one, the dead zone, which isn't going to happen with the keys, but if you're using a joystick, you're probably going to want a dead zone, so you're not constantly always getting a value. It'll be 0 when it's below a certain amount. So now we have, anyways, so we have the shooting, we have actions, we have on releasing, on pressing. I said that can also go to press and release. We have hold timers, we have a float value, a vector 2 value. What else can we do? So the performed events and the button events, I don't know, I don't really use them. I just don't bother. We can get bools. The move vector, I think, is a specialized playmaker action. Yeah, and it's just to go relative to a camera, which is good. I mean, it's a handy action to have. It saves you stuff. If we wanted to enable a map, I don't know if this stuff actually works. Last I played around with enabling it, there were some issues. Okay, let's enable, disable. Let's disable that, and then let's no. And what? Let's put it over here. Ba-doop. And then let's put it back over here and enable it. If we go to this state. All right, now we have something happening, sort of. So if I hit the buttons, we're getting our values. Okay, cool. If I hit my O and release, oh, I have disabled my action map, I suppose. I figured that would have been just for that one action, but I guess it's the whole map. So let's enable action. All right, we'll just disable an action instead. So get rid of that one. Now, obviously, turning a map on and off is actually really, really useful, right? You're running a character, you don't want to be running your UI actions necessarily. You'll open your UI or whatever the case is, you disable your player, enable your UI. All right, so now we have that. I hit O, we come back, and I no longer have access to my vector. But I hit it again, and oh, you know what? You know what I didn't do? That's on the map. Let's copy that, paste it over here, and do an enable. Right, so we're going there. It no longer works. We press and hold our P for 3 seconds, and it's working again. And it's disabled. Okay. Now, in reality, I mean, that's, for a lot of it, that's really all it really is. So, but it's about the actions. It's not so much like, oh, get key down and just keep reusing it. You can reuse these things, obviously. It's just based on an event happening. But the way it's set up, it's really nice to have, I want an action for shooting, I want an action for reloading, and they could use the same button. There's no problem with that, right? Like, we could have, like, if we say shooting, let's just duplicate it, and let's call this one reload, right? And so it's exactly the same. It's duplicated, other than having a different name. So I could, in here, let's duplicate this guy, and let's change him to the reload. There we go. And let's say reload. But they're using the same button, right? So you normally wouldn't have these in the same state here because it isn't going to work, right? If I press O, it's going to go up there. And that's all it's ever going to do. It's never going to go to that, to the reload. Now, if this one was turned off, now it's turned off, now it goes to the reload just fine, right? Because it came out this side. So, but they're using the same button, and that's the point, right? So, I mean, you could have it here, like we have, okay, we're shooting our gun, and we're in a different state, and instead of just reusing that action, which you totally could, we can have another action set up for a different name, which is the same button, but maybe you might want some modifications to it, or we're enabling stuff, or whatever the case is. Maybe you just want to keep things neat and tidy, and you just want, okay, your actions, they're happening, so you can keep everything in track. But anyways, so there is a lot of literally just how that whole system works. It's, you have your map. Under the map, we create our actions. Right? Under the actions, we can do alterations here. So not really so much with the vectors and that, but with the button presses. Press, release, press and release. Make as many actions as you want. You want one for pressing, one for releasing, or one that just does both and just reuse it. Fly at her. Floats and vector 2s. Like I said, you have bools. Right? We could totally change this to a value, and I guess we just go with a button value, and let's do press and release. All right, so this one's a button, this one's a value. I don't know what a bone is. I know what a double is. Don't know what a bone is. All right, so if I turn this one off and we come, well, it won't actually come over here, but it will store value now. It'll store bool. Might be useful if you want to do certain button combinations, I suppose. All right, so it's false, it's true. Oh, and I still have the, apparently I got the action still happening, so. Oh, and the trigger only fires just briefly, which is why in this one, compared to the other action it fires constantly, which is where we had that one issue. If you remember, like button events, right? And this might be, in this scenario, it might be a better thing to do. Is that reloading we did that too? I think so. Right, so instead of using the events per se, just using a bool. Right, so it's true and it's false. Right, so there's kind of, I guess, one of the difference with. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I think one of the important things is if you look at, like, say the UI. Now this one's set up by Unity, right? And as you can tell, like, there's a fair bit of actions here, right? We have the navigate, and we have different ways to navigate it. We have the submit, and submit says any. Sure. Cancel, point, click. I don't know yet, but you have little kind of things. Well, you have a whole bunch of things, though, right? Like under the player one, you got move, look, and fire, right? It's super simple, basic, and you could extend that down. Add another 10, 15 things to that. It's all good. But anyways, that is our maps. Okay, and you can swap maps just as is. The one thing that we can't do, at least not in this tutorial anyways, is the remapping. I believe, and I could be wrong about this, but I believe the remapping will take some custom actions. You should be able to do this as well. I haven't tried this, but I'm assuming this should work just fine. I'm going to call this one something else. And I'm going to open up these events again. And on the tutorial stuff, on the shoot, drag this one in. And we're going to say on this guy, send event. And I totally forgot. I guess I could have just looked over. It was sitting right there. There we go. And let's go up there, hit play. So I mean, that should work fine. I don't see why that wouldn't work. Right, so if I hit O, there we go. Running Unity events. Now with the way Playmaker works in that, it's not going to be able to collect any data from it. I mean, you can fire the events from it. That's cool. But we're not going to be doing a whole lot of stuff. So I mean, it's not really the best. Hopefully to clear up any issues that are about this whole new input system, right? On how it kind of works and how you set it up, right? Actions are literally just that. They're actions. What do you want as an action? I want an action to, jump. I want an action to sprint, and then define what that action is in the ways of inputs, right? And don't forget about the interactions. And yeah, that should be good.